Have you ever reached for something on a shelf, something you've grabbed 100 times before, and your hand just missed? Not by much, maybe an inch, maybe two, but enough to make you pause and think, what just happened? Most people brush it off. Maybe you were distracted, maybe you were tired. But if it's happening more than once, if you're noticing your movements aren't landing quite where you expect them to, your doctor will probably tell you it's aging. They'll say it's arthritis. They'll recommend supplements for your joints, exercises for your muscles, maybe some physical therapy, and none of it will work. Because the problem isn't in your hands, it isn't in your shoulders, and it definitely isn't in your joints. The problem is in a small cluster of brain cells that control precision, and right now, they're starving. Subscribe to Dr. Hartman and hit like if you want the truth your insurance company isn't paying your doctor to tell you. The system makes money when you stay confused, not when you get better. Help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers, and let's fix that one honest video at a time. Let me start with something you can test right now. Hold your arm out in front of you. Now, with your eyes closed, touch the tip of your nose with your index finger. If you're healthy, your finger goes exactly where you intended. No searching, no correction, straight line, perfect landing. Now imagine someone who can't do that. Their finger starts moving, gets close, and then wanders. It hovers around the nose, searching for the target. Sometimes it lands on the cheek. Sometimes it misses entirely. Both people have working arms. Both have intact muscles and functional joints. So what's the difference? What's different is the system that converts intention into action. Your muscles don't know where your nose is. They don't have GPS. They need instructions. And those instructions come from a very specific part of your brain called the cerebellum. The cerebellum sits at the back of your skull, tucked just beneath the occipital lobe. It's small, maybe 10% of your brain's total volume. But here's the number that should stop you cold. The cerebellum contains more than 50% of all the neurons in your entire brain. Half of all your brain cells, packed into one fist-sized structure. That tells you everything about how much computational power your body dedicates to one task, coordinating precise, smooth, intentional movement. Every single second, your cerebellum is processing 4 separate streams of information simultaneously. First, proprioception. Those are the sensors buried in your muscles, tendons, and joints that constantly report where your body parts are in space. You don't see your hand behind your back, but you know exactly where it is. That's proprioception. Second, vestibular input. That's your inner ear balance system telling your brain how your head is oriented relative to gravity, whether you're tilted, spinning, or upside down. Third, visual data. What your eyes are seeing about the world around you, the objects, the distances, the movement. Fourth, motor planning. The instructions coming from your frontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain that decides, I want to pick up that cup. The cerebellum takes all of that in real time, compares what you intended with what's actually happening, and sends instant corrective signals to your muscles. It's the autopilot of precision. And when it starts failing, you feel it immediately. Not as pain, not as weakness, as clumsiness. Here's something that will change how you think about reaching for objects forever. Every time you reach for something, your brain is making thousands of micro-predictions. It predicts how far your arm needs to extend. It predicts how fast your hand needs to move. It predicts the exact moment your fingers need to close around the object. And all of those predictions are based on past experience stored in your cerebellum. This is why a baby learning to grab a toy misses constantly. Not because their arm is weak, not because they don't understand the concept of grab, because their cerebellum hasn't built the database yet. It hasn't learned the relationship between how hard to contract a muscle and how far the hand actually moves. The baby reaches, overshoots, reaches again, undershoots, reaches again. And gradually, over hundreds of attempts, the cerebellum builds a precision map. Eventually, reaching becomes automatic. You stop thinking about it entirely. But here's what happens later in life. After years, after decades, coordination problems can return. And this time, it's not about learning. The person knows how to reach. Those neural pathways exist. The problem is different. The blood supply to the brain regions controlling movement has degraded, and because of chronic oxygen shortage, those regions start underperforming. I need you to understand something fundamental about your brain as an organ. Your brain weighs roughly 3 pounds. That's about 2% of your total body weight. And yet, it consumes approximately 20% of all the oxygen you breathe. 20%, for 2% of your body mass. Your brain is extraordinarily expensive to run, metabolically speaking. It's more sensitive to drops in oxygen than almost any other tissue in your body. Within seconds of losing blood supply, neurons begin dying. That's what a stroke is, the extreme, catastrophic version. But long before stroke territory, when there's chronic, moderate reduction in blood flow, the brain begins working less efficiently. And the first things to fail are the most energy-intensive functions: precision, coordination, short-term memory, processing speed. Here's a principle you need to carry with you. The brain is not a collection of isolated, independent compartments. When blood flow drops in one area, it's almost never the case that the rest of the brain is perfectly fine. Usually, the whole brain suffers. Some areas are more vulnerable than others. And if you're noticing coordination problems, dropping things, missing targets, I can tell you with near certainty that you have other symptoms of reduced cerebral circulation as well. You may just not have connected them yet. Let me walk you through those symptoms because this matters. First, word-finding difficulty. You're talking, mid-sentence, and the word you need just vanishes. You know the concept. You can picture what you're trying to say, but the word itself has disappeared. You pause, you circle around it, and 5 minutes later it pops back into your head unprompted. Second, slower task completion. Things that used to take you 30 minutes now take 45. Not because you're being more thorough, not because the task got harder, because your brain needs more time to execute the same sequence of steps. Third, reduced mental stamina. By afternoon or evening, your brain feels heavy, like it's running on fumes. You know you need to keep working, but productivity has collapsed. You're staring at the same paragraph, reading it 3 times, and none of it is landing. Patients describe this as brain fog, or feeling like they're thinking through mud. If you recognize yourself in any of that, don't panic. This is not a diagnosis of doom. It's information. And information is the starting point for doing something about it. Let me tell you a story from my practice, because it illustrates this connection between brain blood flow and precision better than any textbook could. A few years ago, a woman came to see me. She was 52, a professional pianist. She'd been playing since she was 6 years old. 46 years of muscle memory, thousands of hours of practice, performances, recordings, the whole career. And then, over the course of about 6 months, something changed. She started missing notes. Not because she didn't know the piece, she could hear the music perfectly in her head, but her fingers wouldn't land where she intended them to. At first, she thought it was tension, so she worked on relaxation techniques. Then she thought maybe it was arthritis, so she tried anti-inflammatory supplements. She even switched to a different piano, thinking maybe the key resistance was off. Nothing worked. The problem kept getting worse. When she came to my office, she was terrified. She thought she was developing early-onset Parkinson's disease or some kind of degenerative nerve condition. I asked her about other symptoms, and that's when the picture opened up. Yes, she had coordination problems, but she also had started forgetting appointments. She'd walk into a room and forget why she went there. She felt mentally exhausted by mid-afternoon, and she'd noticed that when she stood up too quickly, she'd get a brief spinning sensation. All of it pointed to one thing: reduced blood flow to the cerebellum and the parietal cortex, the brain regions responsible for spatial coordination and fine motor control. I examined her neck, and there it was. The upper cervical vertebrae, specifically C1 and C2, were locked, restricted. The muscles surrounding them were rock hard, and the vertebral arteries, the vessels that supply the cerebellum, were being compressed. We started working on releasing those restrictions. Within 2 weeks, she noticed a difference. Not complete resolution, but improvement. Her fingers were landing more accurately, the mental fog started lifting. Within 6 weeks, she was back to performing. Same piano, same hands, same brain. The only thing that changed was blood flow. One mechanical problem, multiple symptoms, one solution. So, why the neck? Why does the source of a coordination problem so often sit in the cervical spine? The answer is in anatomy, and the anatomy here is remarkable. Running up through your neck are 2 vertebral arteries. They don't just run alongside the vertebrae, they run inside them. Each cervical vertebra has a feature called a transverse foramen, a hole through the bony lateral projection of the vertebra. The vertebral artery passes through these holes, one vertebra at a time, ascending from the base of the neck upward. It then curves over the top of the first cervical vertebra, called the atlas, and enters the skull through the foramen magnum, the large opening at the base of your skull. Inside the skull, the right and left vertebral arteries merge into the basilar artery, and the basilar artery supplies the cerebellum, the brainstem, and the occipital lobes of the brain. That entire network is called the vertebrobasilar system. Do you see what this means? The artery that feeds your cerebellum is threaded through bone. It passes through the vertebrae themselves, and if there's tension, restriction, chronic muscle spasm, or reduced mobility in those bones and surrounding tissues, that will compress and distort those arteries. A vertebra shifted slightly out of alignment, a muscle in chronic spasm, a shortened ligament. Each one adds a new bend or constriction to the artery. The lumen, the open channel inside the vessel, narrows. Blood flow drops. Not dramatically, not enough to cause a stroke, but chronically, year after year, and the cerebellum spends years running on reduced fuel supply. Our goal is to remove those mechanical restrictions, free the neck, restore the natural diameter of the vertebral arteries. When you do that, blood flow to the cerebellum improves, and coordination improves with it. Before I give you the exercises, I need to address the most common mistake people make when they decide to work on their neck. Because this mistake doesn't just waste your time, it can make things worse. When most people feel neck tension and decide to stretch it, they tilt their head side to side, pull their ear toward their shoulder, rotate back and forth. All of that action lands on the middle segment of the cervical spine, roughly the 4th and 5th cervical vertebrae. That segment is already the most mobile part of the neck. It already bears the highest daily load. Stretching it further is like loosening a hinge that's already too loose. You're adding instability, while the actually restricted zones stay locked. The zones that are actually locked are different. The first critical area is the cervicothoracic junction, the 6th and 7th cervical vertebrae, and the 1st and 2nd thoracic vertebrae. This is where most people who sit at computers, move too little, or habitually slouch develop their primary restrictions. This is where the so-called tech neck or dowager's hump appears, that mound at the base of the neck that people write off as poor posture or accumulated fat. It isn't fat. It's a chronic muscular and ligamentous block with overloaded vertebrae underneath, and it directly impacts vertebral artery flow. The second critical area is the very top of the cervical spine, the 1st and 2nd cervical vertebrae, called the atlas and the axis. This is the zone closest to the skull. This is where the vertebral arteries make their final bend before entering the cranial cavity. Restrictions here are the most consequential for blood flow. Here's the first exercise. This targets the upper cervical junction, specifically C1 and C2. Lie on your back. Place a small, firm ball, about the size of a tennis ball or lacrosse ball, under the base of your skull. Not under your neck, under your skull, just to one side of the midline. You should feel the ball pressing into the soft tissue where your skull meets your neck. This is where the suboccipital muscles attach, the tiny, powerful muscles that control the fine movements of your head. Stay there, don't move. Just let your head rest on the ball. The weight of your head provides the pressure. You'll feel tension, maybe discomfort. Not sharp pain, but a deep, dull ache. That's the muscle releasing. Hold for 90 seconds. Then move the ball slightly, maybe half an inch to the side, and hold again. Work both sides, 5 to 6 points on each side. Total time, about 8 to 10 minutes. What's happening here? Chronic tension in the suboccipital muscles creates constant pulling force on the atlas and axis. That pulling restricts their movement and compresses the vertebral arteries as they curve over the atlas. By releasing that tension, you're allowing those vertebrae to move more freely, and you're reducing mechanical pressure on the arteries. The second exercise targets the scalene muscles. These are 3 muscles on each side of your neck that run from your cervical vertebrae down to your 1st and 2nd ribs. When they're tight, they restrict neck rotation and compress the subclavian artery, which feeds into the vertebral system. Here's how to stretch them. Sit upright. Place your right hand on the top of your head. Gently pull your head toward your right shoulder, tilting your ear down. Now here's the key. Don't just tilt sideways. Add a slight backward tilt. You're tilting your head back and to the side at the same time. You should feel a stretch along the left side of your neck, running from behind your ear down toward your collarbone. Hold for 30 seconds. Breathe slowly. Then switch sides. Do this 3 times per side, twice a day. This stretch is gentle, but it's extraordinarily effective. The scalenes are often overlooked in standard neck stretching protocols, but they're critically important for vascular flow. Now we've improved blood flow. We've opened the road. Now we need to give the cerebellum actual work. Because the cerebellum is trainable, exactly the way muscles are trainable. When you give it tasks it struggles to perform, it ramps up its own metabolic activity, builds new neural connections, and gradually gets better at those tasks. This is neuroplasticity, the brain's documented capacity to restructure and adapt itself in response to demand. First exercise, finger to nose with eyes closed. Stand or sit, close your eyes. Touch your nose with your right index finger. Now touch your left ear with the same finger. Then your nose again. Then your right ear. Alternate. Nose, left ear, nose, right ear. 20 repetitions. At first you'll miss. Your finger will search. That's the cerebellum learning. After a few days you'll start landing accurately, even with your eyes closed. Second exercise, alternating hand patterns. Place both hands flat on a table. With your right hand, tap the table once. With your left hand, tap twice. Right hand, 1 tap. Left hand, 2 taps. Alternate. Speed up gradually. This forces your cerebellum to coordinate 2 different motor patterns simultaneously. It's harder than it sounds. Third exercise, balance beam walk. Find a straight line on the floor. A tile edge, a piece of tape, anything. Walk along it, heel to toe, arms out to the sides. Eyes forward, not down. Walk forward, then backward. This activates your vestibular system and forces your cerebellum to make constant micro-corrections to keep you balanced. These 3 exercises take 10 minutes total. Do them daily. Here's something I want you to think about. The effects I've described, the clumsiness, the mental fog, the coordination problems, don't show up at the same age or with the same intensity in everyone. In people over 50, cerebellar symptoms tend to become significantly more pronounced, both because of cumulative changes to cervical tissue over decades and because vascular elasticity naturally decreases with age. How old are you? Write it in the comments. I genuinely want to see which age groups are watching this, because it will help me focus future videos on the stages where this information is most urgently needed. Let me give you your clear action plan, because watching a video without walking away with specific instructions is a waste of your time. First, every day, release the upper cervical muscles. Lie on the ball under the base of your skull, 8 to 10 minutes. This is not optional, it's the foundation. Second, stretch the scalenes. 3 rounds per side, twice a day. Gentle, controlled, no force. Third, train your cerebellum. Finger to nose, alternating hand patterns, balance beam walk, 10 minutes daily. If you do these things consistently, you will notice changes, not in weeks, often within days. Because when you remove a mechanical obstruction from a vessel, blood flow improves immediately. And when the cerebellum gets adequate fuel again, it works better immediately. Nobody sitting behind a clinic desk is going to hand you this information. There's no billing code for teaching you to fix your own cervical blood flow. The healthcare system doesn't profit from your recovery. I'm Dr. Hartman, and I've spent 15 years watching what happens when patients finally understand what's actually going on in their bodies. Subscribe to Dr. Hartman, leave a like, and help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers. We're building something that actually serves you, not the insurance companies.